A broke janitor, mocked by his own family for his humble life, inherits a crumbling mansion everyone calls worthless. But when he steps inside, a hidden secret worth $200 million changes everything. What he finds inside will leave you speechless. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. The janitor's humble life. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting a sickly glow over the polished floors of the prestigious law firm of Harrington and Lowe. It was past midnight, and the towering skyscrapers of Chicago glittered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The only sound in the empty office was a rhythmic squeak of a mop gliding across marble, pushed by callous hands. Ethan Carter wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve, his muscles aching from another 12-hour shift. At 42, his body didn't bounce back the way it used to. His work boots, scuffed and worn thin at the soles, whispered against the tile as he moved. He had long since stopped noticing the way his lower back throbbed after hours of bending and scrubbing. He paused, glancing at the framed portraits of the firm's partners lining the hallway, men in tailored suits, their smiles sharp and self-assured. The kind of men who had never spent a day worrying about rent or grocery bills. The kind of men who barely glanced at him when they passed by in the halls. Ethan exhaled, tightening his grip on the mop. He wasn't ashamed of his job. He took pride in doing it well. But sometimes the weight of invisibility pressed down on him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his sister, Megan. "Don't forget, Mom's birthday dinner is tomorrow. Daniel will be there." Ethan's jaw clenched. Daniel, his perfect cousin, the golden child of the family. A hotshot real estate developer who never missed an opportunity to remind Ethan of his life choices. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and returned to his work, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. The next evening, Ethan stood in front of his tiny apartment mirror, adjusting the collar of his only button-down shirt. It was slightly frayed at the cuffs, but it was clean. He ran a hand through his dark, slightly graying hair and sighed. His apartment was small, a studio with a kitchenette barely big enough to turn around in, but it was his. The walls were lined with second-hand books, his one indulgence. He had always loved reading, losing himself in stories of adventure and far-off places. Maybe that was why he never minded the solitude of his job. In the quiet hours, he could imagine a different life. A sharp knock at the door startled him. "Ethan, you ready or what?" His neighbor and only friend, Luis, leaned against the doorframe, grinning. "Big family night, huh?" Ethan managed a weak smile. "Yeah, can't wait." Luis, a mechanic with perpetual oil stain on his shirt, clapped him on the shoulder. "Hey, chin up. Maybe this time they won't be insufferable." Ethan snorted. "When pigs fly." The restaurant was one of those trendy downtown places with dim lighting and plates that cost more than Ethan made in a day. He could already hear the laughter from the private room in the back, his family's laughter. He took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Immediately, the conversation died down. His mother, seated at the head of the table, brightened. "Ethan, you made it." Before he could respond, Daniel's smooth voice cut in. "Wow, you actually showed up. I figured you'd be stuck cleaning someone's toilet." A few chuckles rippled around the table. Ethan forced a smile, sliding into the only empty seat, right next to Daniel. His cousin looked immaculate, as always. Designer suit, perfectly styled hair, a Rolex glinting on his wrist. He swirled his glass of bourbon lazily, smirking. "So, Ethan," Daniel said, leaning in just enough for the others to hear, "still mopping floors for a living?" Ethan kept his voice even. "Someone's got to do it." Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "Man, I don't get you. You could have been something, but you just gave up." The word stung, but Ethan was used to it. He had heard variations of this speech his whole life. "You're wasting your potential. You could have been like Daniel." His mother reached over, patting his hand. "We just worry about you, sweetheart. You work so hard, and for what?" Ethan stared at his plate. For dignity, for survival, but he didn't say it. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of backhanded compliments and subtle jabs. By the time dessert arrived, Ethan's shoulders were tight with tension. Then, as if the universe had decided to throw him a bone, his phone buzzed again. An unknown number. He excused himself and stepped outside, answering. "Mr. Carter?" A formal voice. "This is Attorney Charles Whitmore. I'm calling regarding the estate of your late uncle, Robert Carter." Ethan frowned. "My uncle? I barely knew him." "Be that as it may," the lawyer continued, "you've been named the sole beneficiary of his property, the Blackwood estate in upstate New York." Ethan's breath caught. "What?" "It's quite sizable, though I should warn you, it's in disrepair." Ethan's mind raced. A house? An actual inheritance? When he returned to the table, his family was laughing at some story Daniel was telling. He cleared his throat. "I just got a call," he said slowly. "I inherited a house." Silence. Then Daniel burst out laughing. "Oh, this is rich." "What?" "Some crack house in the bad part of town." Ethan met his eyes. "No, a mansion." The table erupted in disbelief. The ruined mansion. The drive to Blackwood estate took 5 hours, and with every mile, Ethan's stomach twisted tighter. The lawyer's words echoed in his mind. Sizable property, disrepair, sole beneficiary. He hadn't even known Uncle Robert owned a mansion. The man had been a shadowy figure in family stories, mentioned in hushed tones as an eccentric one who disappeared for years at a time. Ethan's beat-up pickup truck groaned as it climbed the winding road into the hills of upstate New York. The trees grew thicker, their branches clawing at the gray sky. He checked the GPS again, just a few more turns. Then he saw it. The iron gates were rusted shut, vines strangling the bars. Beyond them, a long, weed-choked driveway led to a monster silhouette against the horizon. Blackwood Estate. Ethan parked and stepped out, the cold air biting his skin. He fumbled with the ancient key the lawyer had mailed him, hands trembling as he forced it into the gate's lock. With a screech of protesting metal, the gates grudgingly swung open. The mansion loomed ahead, a hulking Victorian relic with peeling paint and shattered windows. The roof sagged in places, and the wraparound porch looked one strong breeze away from collapse. But despite its decay, there was something imposing about it, like it had been waiting for him. Ethan swallowed hard and started up the driveway, gravel crunching under his boots. He didn't hear the car pull up behind him until the engine cut off. Well, look at this place. Ethan spun around. Daniel leaned against his shiny black Mercedes, arms crossed, smirking. Megan stood beside him, her designer coat flapping in the wind. Ethan's pulse spiked. "What are you doing here?" Daniel shrugged. "Couldn't let you have all the fun. I had to see this mansion for myself." His smirk widened as he took in the crumbling facade. "Oh, Ethan, this isn't a mansion. It's a tear down." Megan wrinkled her nose. "It smells like mold and dead animals." Ethan clenched his fists. "Why did you even come?" Daniel strolled past him, hands in his pockets. "Call it curiosity. Or maybe I just wanted to see the look on your face when you realized Uncle Robert left you a money pit." He kicked a loose piece of siding. "This place isn't worth the land it's sitting on." Ethan ignored him and turned toward the house. He wouldn't let Daniel ruin this. Not where it was the first thing that had ever been his. The front door was massive, its once grand carvings now weathered and chipped. The key turned with effort, and the door creaked open, releasing a gust of stale, dusty air. Inside, the foyer was a graveyard of broken furniture and shredded curtains. Sunlight streamed through holes in the ceiling, illuminating swirling dust motes. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, peeling like dead skin. But then Ethan noticed something else. The floorboards were etched with strange symbols, tiny intricate markings barely visible beneath layers of grime. He crouched, running his fingers over them. They didn't look random. They looked deliberate. Daniel's laugh echoed through the empty house. "You're really going to try to fix this dump? Good luck getting a bank to loan you money for this." Ethan stood, jaw tight. "I didn't ask for your opinion." Megan wandered into what must have once been a grand parlor, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "You know, if you sold the land, you might get something for it," she mused. "Daniel could probably help you find a buyer." Daniel's eyes gleamed. "For a small fee, of course." Ethan didn't answer. He was too busy staring at the far wall of the foyer, where an old portrait hung crookedly. The painting was of a stern-faced man. Uncle Robert, he assumed. But what caught his eye was the faint outline behind it. A door? He stepped closer, pushing the portrait aside. A hidden compartment. Inside, nestled in the shadows, was a small iron key and a yellowed piece of paper. Ethan's hands shook as he unfolded it. The message was short, written in spidery handwriting. Beware the seventh step. Daniel's voice cut through the silence. What's that? Ethan quickly pocketed the key and note. Nothing. But Daniel wasn't stupid. He'd seen the flicker of excitement in Ethan's eyes. His smirk faded, replaced by something sharper, more calculating. You're hiding something, Daniel said slowly. Ethan met his gaze. It's my house. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. Fine, keep your secrets. But remember, I'm the one with connections. If this place is worth something, you'll need me. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't trust himself to speak. Daniel turned on his heel, grabbing Megan's arm. Come on, let's leave Ethan to his project. As their car disappeared down the driveway, Ethan exhaled, his fingers brushing the key in his pocket. He had no idea what beware the seventh step meant, but he was going to find out. The first clue. The silence of the mansion pressed down on Ethan like a physical weight after Daniel and Megan left. He stood in the grand foyer, the dust motes swirling in the late afternoon sunlight, his fingers still curled around the iron key in his pocket. The note's warning, beware the seventh step, echoed in his mind. He turned his gaze toward the grand staircase. It was an imposing structure, its once elegant banister now chipped and splintered, the carpet runner frayed and moth-eaten. The steps themselves seemed sturdy enough, though years of neglect had left them worn and uneven. Ethan approached cautiously, his boots thudding softly against the wood. He counted as he climbed. 1, 2, 3. The house creaked around him, the sound like a whisper from the past. 4, 5, 6. He hesitated before placing his foot on the seventh step, that would look no different from the others. Same faded oak, same layered dust. But as he pressed down, the board let out a low, ominous groan. Ethan froze. Then, with a sudden click, the steps shifted beneath his weight. He barely had time to react before the board tilted downward, revealing a dark, narrow space beneath it. His heart hammered against his ribs as he crouched, peering into the shadows. Inside was a small compartment, just large enough to hold a slim wooden box. Ethan pulled it out, his breath coming fast. The box was old, its surface carved with the same strange symbols he'd noticed on the floorboards earlier. His fingers trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside lay a single, yellowed envelope. He tore it open, unfolding the brittle paper within. The handwriting matched the first note, spidery, deliberate. If you found this, you're closer than you think. The vault lies beneath, but the path is not for the faint of heart. Seek the raven's gaze in the study. Ethan's pulse spiked. A vault? Was that what the key was for? He tucked the note into his pocket and stood, glancing around as if the walls themselves might hold answers. The study. That had to be one of the rooms on the first floor. The mansion seemed to watch him as he descended the stairs, its empty windows like unblinking eyes. The air grew colder as he moved down the hallway, his footsteps echoing. The study door was partially ajar, its hinges protesting as he pushed it open. The room was a time capsule, a massive oak desk, shelves lined with mildewed books, and a threadbare rug that might have once been crimson. An enormous portrait of a raven in flight dominated the far wall, its beady eyes seeming to follow him. Seek the raven's gaze. Ethan moved closer, studying the painting. The bird's wings were outstretched, its talons clutching a silver key, just like the one in his pocket. But it was the eyes that caught his attention. They weren't painted. They were small, dark gemstones embedded into the canvas. He reached out, brushing his fingers over the raven's right eye. It moved. With a sharp inhale, Ethan pressed a gemstone. It sank inward with a soft click. A hidden compartment in the wall slid open. Inside was a lever, rusted but still intact. Ethan gripped it, hesitating only a second before pulling. Somewhere deep within the house, Gears groaned. The sound was followed by a low, shuddering rumble, like stone grinding against stone. Ethan bolted from the study, following the noise. It led him back to the foyer, where a section of the floor near the base of the stairs had shifted, revealing a dark, gaping hole. A set of narrow stone steps spiraled down into blackness. His throat went dry. This was it, the path to the vault. A floorboard creaked behind him. Ethan spun around. Daniel stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You really are full of surprises, aren't you?" Daniel said softly. Ethan's grip tightened on the iron key. "What are you doing here?" Daniel smirked, stepping forward. "I had a feeling you'd find something interesting. And I was right." His gaze flicked to the open passageway. "What's down there?" Ethan didn't answer. Daniel's smirk faded. "You know, Ethan, this doesn't have to be difficult. We're family. We could work together." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threat. Ethan took a slow step back toward the stairs. "This isn't yours." Daniel's eyes darkened. "We'll see about that." Then, from the shadows of the hallway, another figure emerged, Megan, her phone in hand, recording. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "you didn't really think we'd just leave, did you?" Ethan's stomach dropped. They had been watching him the whole time. The hidden vault. The air in the foyer grew thick with tension as Ethan stood between the dark stairway and his smirking cousins. Daniel took another step forward, his polished shoes clicking against the worn floorboards. "You always were terrible at sharing, Ethan," Daniel said, his voice smooth but edged with something dangerous. "But this is bigger than you." Megan lowered her phone, her smile sharp. "We're family. Should we all benefit from whatever's down there?" Ethan's fingers curled around the iron key in his pocket. The weight of it grounded him. This was his. His uncle had left it to him. "You followed me," Ethan said flatly. Daniel shrugged. "Call it due diligence. You really think I'd let you walk into an inheritance without checking out first?" His gaze flicked to the open passage behind Ethan. "Now, are we doing this the easy way or the hard way?" Ethan didn't move. Daniel sighed, rolling his eyes. "Fine." With a snap of his fingers, a broad-shouldered man Ethan didn't recognize stepped into the foyer from the front door. Security. Of course Daniel had brought backup. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. He was outnumbered, but the mansion seemed to hum around him, as if the walls themselves were whispering a warning. The floorboard beneath Daniel's foot let out a sharp crack. For a split second, everyone froze. Then, with a groan of protesting wood, the seventh step, the same one Ethan had triggered earlier, collapsed beneath Daniel's weight. He yelped, his arms flailing as he crashed through the rotten wood, landing hard in the shallow space beneath the stairs. Megan shrieked. The security guy lunged forward to help, but Ethan didn't wait. He turned and bolted down the stone steps into the darkness. The air grew colder as he descended, the only light coming from faint, flickering bulbs strung along the low ceiling. The passage smelled of damp earth and old metal. His footsteps echoed as he ran, his breath coming in short bursts. Behind him, he heard shouting, Daniel's furious voice, the thud of footsteps giving chase. Ethan pushed himself faster. The tunnel ended abruptly at a massive steel door, its surface pitted with rust but still solid. A keyhole gleamed in the dim light. Ethan fumbled for the iron key, his hands shaking. The footsteps behind him grew louder. He jammed the key into the lock and twisted. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of ancient mechanisms, the door shuddered open. Ethan stumbled inside and froze. The vault was huge. Stacks of gold bars lined one wall. Antique paintings leaned against another, their frames gilded and gleaming even in the low light. A ledger lay open on a central table, its pages filled with handwritten entries, dates, amounts, transactions. But it was the far wall that made Ethan's breath catch. A collection of vintage cars, covered in dust but unmistakably pristine, sat parked in a row like sleeping beasts. A 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, a Bugatti Type 57, each worth millions. The ledger's final entry flashed in his vision. Total estimated value, $200 million. A noise behind him. Ethan whirled around. Daniel stood in the doorway, his suit torn and his face smeared with dirt. His eyes locked onto the treasure, widening with undisguised greed. Then he smiled. "Oh, Ethan," Daniel murmured. "You have no idea what you just walked into." The Raven's shadow. The vault's cold air clung to Ethan's skin as Daniel stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the stone floor. The flickering bulbs overhead cast jagged shadows across his face, twisting his smirk into something predatory. "You really thought you could keep this to yourself?" Daniel's voice echoed off the steel walls. Behind him, the hulking security guard filled the doorway, arms crossed. Ethan's back pressed against the ledger table. His fingers brushed against something cold and heavy, a rusted fire poker left leaning against the wall. He curled his hand around it slowly, keeping it hidden behind his leg. "It's not yours," Ethan repeated, his voice steadier than he felt. Daniel laughed, spreading his arms wide as he turned in a slow circle, taking the gold, the cars, the stacks of vintage wine crates. "Oh, but it could be ours. Think about it, Ethan. With this kind of money, you'd never have to clean another toilet in your life." The words slithered between them. Tempting. That was Daniel's gift, making corruption sound like generosity. A shuffling noise came from the tunnel. Megan appeared, breathless, her manicured nails digging into the doorframe as she gaped at the vault's contents. "Oh my God!" Ethan's grip tightened on the poker. He had one advantage. They didn't know about the weapon. Daniel reached into his suit jacket. Ethan tensed, but what emerged wasn't a gun. It was a folded document. "See this? A little insurance policy." He shook it open, revealing official-looking letterhead. "Contingency claim on Blackwood Estate. Signed by dear old Uncle Robert's business partner, just in case anything happened to him." Ethan's stomach dropped. "That's bullshit." "Is it?" Daniel tapped the paper. "The courts will decide. But here's what's going to happen. You can walk away right now, and in return, I'll make sure you get, let's say, 5%. Generous, considering you'd get nothing in court." The security guard cracked his knuckles. Megan edged closer to the gold bars, her phone still recording. "Be reasonable, Ethan. This is life-changing money either way." Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. He'd spent a lifetime being reasonable. A lifetime of lowered eyes and silent acceptance. The fire poker felt solid in his hand. Then a sound, a deep, metallic clang from somewhere in the tunnels. Everyone froze. It came again. Clang, clang, like something heavy being dragged. Daniel's smirk faltered. "What the hell is that?" The security guard turned, peering into the dark tunnel. Probably just the old pipes. A shadow moved. Not a pipe, not the wind. Something alive. The guard barely had time to shout before a figure lunged from the darkness. A gaunt man in tattered clothes, wild-eyed, swinging what looked like a rusted shovel. The impact sent the guard crashing into a stack of gold bars with a deafening crash. Megan screamed. The stranger whirled on them, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His face was streaked with dirt, his matted hair hanging in greasy clumps. But when his eyes locked onto Ethan, recognition flashed. "You!" the man croaked. "You're Robert's boy." Ethan's blood turned to ice. "Who are you?" The shovel clattered to the ground as the man grabbed Ethan's arm with surprising strength. "No time. They're coming." Daniel recovered first. "What the fuck is this?" He grabbed Megan's arm, dragging her back toward the tunnel. "We're leaving." The stranger's grip tightened. "Listen to me. The Raven's shadow falls at midnight. That's when they'll come for it." Ethan tried to pull away. "Who? Come for what?" A new sound cut through the chaos, the distant wail of sirens. The stranger's eyes went wide with panic. He shoved something into Ethan's hand, a small cold metal object, before bolting back into the tunnel, disappearing into the dark. Ethan looked down. A silver pendant in the shape of a raven, its wings outstretched. The sirens grew louder. Midnight's approach. The sirens wailed closer, their shrill cries slicing through the musty air of the vault. Ethan clutched the raven pendant, its edges biting into his palm. The stranger's warning echoed in his mind. The Raven's shadow falls at midnight. They're coming for it. Daniel grabbed Megan's arm, his face pale under the flickering lights. "We need to go. Now." The security guard groaned on the floor, clutching his head where the shovel had struck him. Gold bars lay scattered around him like fallen dominoes. Ethan didn't move. His eyes darted between the tunnel where the stranger had vanished and the steel door that led to the outside world. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but the pendant in his hand felt like a tether, holding him in place. What the hell was that? Megan whispered, her voice trembling. Did he know Uncle Robert? Daniel's jaw tightened. Doesn't matter. The cops will be here any second. If they find us with all this. Ethan finally snapped into action. He shoved the pendant into his pocket and grabbed the ledger from the table, tucking it under his arm. Then we split up. They can't catch all of us. Daniel's eyes flicked the ledger, then back to Ethan's face. A silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't over. Fine, Daniel spat. He hauled the security guard to his feet and dragged him toward a secondary tunnel Ethan hadn't noticed before, one partially hidden behind stacked crates. Of course, Daniel had already scoped out an escape route. Megan hesitated, her gaze lingering on the gold. "Ethan!" "Go," Ethan said. She turned and fled after Daniel. The sirens were almost deafening now, their flashing lights casting red and blue streaks through the mansion's broken windows above. Ethan took one last look at the vault, the cars, the gold, the secret still hidden in its shadows, then bolted for the main tunnel. The passageway seemed longer this time, the walls pressing in on him as he ran. His lungs burned, but he didn't dare slow down. The stranger's words repeated in his head like a mantra. "Midnight. They're coming." He burst out into the foyer just as the front door splintered open. "Freeze. Police." Ethan ducked behind the staircase as flashlight beams swept the room. He could hear boots stomping through the house, voices barking orders. Think. His eyes landed on a narrow servant's stairwell tucked beside the kitchen, a relic from a mansion's grander days. He lunged for it, taking the steps two at a time until he reached the second floor. The hallway up here was a maze of closed doors and peeling wallpaper. Ethan picked one at random, slipping inside what must have been a study. Moonlight streamed through a grimy window, illuminating dust-covered furniture and shelves of decaying books. He leaned against the door, catching his breath. The ledger was still clutched in his hands, its pages brittle with age. He flipped it open to a random section, squinting in the dim light. The entries were meticulous. Dates, amounts, names. But one page near the middle made his blood run cold. Payment delivered to V, Asher for services rendered. The raven flies at midnight. The same phrase. Ethan turned the page. More entries, more cryptic notes. Then, near the end, a single sentence stood out, underlined twice in red ink. "If I die, it's because they found out." A floorboard creaked outside the door. Ethan froze. Slow, deliberate footsteps moved down the hall. Not the police. They would have announced themselves. These steps were careful. Hunting. The doorknob turned. Ethan backed toward the window, his pulse roaring in his ears. The latch gave way with a rusty screech as he forced it open. Cold night air rushed in. The door swung open. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. Too tall to be Daniel. The stranger from the vault? No. This man wore a long coat, his face obscured by shadows. "Ethan Carter," the man said. His voice was smooth, almost polite. "We've been looking for you." Ethan didn't wait to hear more. He threw himself out the window, landing hard on the sloping roof below. Shingles scraped his palms as he slid toward the edge, then dropped onto a lower balcony. A gunshot cracked through the night. Ethan didn't look back. He jumped the last 10 feet to ground, rolling to absorb the impact, then sprinted for the tree line. Behind him, the mansion loomed like a gravestone, its windows glowing with the flashlights of the police still searching inside. But Ethan knew the real danger wasn't the law. It was the men who came at midnight, and they were already here. Blood in the shadows. The forest swallowed Ethan whole. Branches whipped at his face as he crashed through the undergrowth, his boots sinking into the damp earth. The gunshot still rang in his ears, a single, piercing crack that sent adrenaline screaming through his veins. He didn't know who had fired. The police, the stranger in the coat, someone else. And he didn't plan to stick around to find out. The ledger was a dead weight under his arm, its pages rustling with every frantic step. He could hear shouts behind him, distant but closing in. Flashlight beams cut through the trees like searching blades. Ethan's lungs burned. He needed to think. Ahead, the ground sloped downward into a narrow ravine where a creek cut through the property. The water would mask his trail. He half slid, half fell down the embankment, his hands scrabbling for purchase on roots and rocks. The icy water hit his ankles with a shock, but he forced himself forward, wading upstream where the current was strongest. After 50 yards, he climbed out on the opposite bank, his clothes soaked and clinging. The shouts had faded. For now, the raven pendant in his pocket seemed to pulse against his thigh, a constant reminder of the stranger's warning. Midnight. He checked his watch. 11:37 p.m. 23 minutes left. Ethan crouched behind a fallen oak, forcing his breathing to steady. He flipped open the ledger to the page he'd last seen, squinting in the moonlight. Payment delivered to V. Asher for services rendered. The raven flies at midnight. And below it, another entry. The collection must never be reunited. If the raven finds its shadow, the debt will be called due. A twig snapped. Ethan slammed the ledger shut, his heart in his throat. The forest had gone eerily silent. No owls, no crickets, just the whisper of leaves in the wind. Someone was out there. Then a low, rasping voice from the darkness. "You shouldn't have come back, Carter." Ethan spun. The stranger from the vault stood 10 feet away, his gaunt face half lit by the moon. Dirt and dried blood streaked his tattered coat. In one hand, he held a rusted hunting knife. In the other, a silver raven pendant identical to Ethan's. "Who are you?" Ethan whispered. The man's lips peeled back in a humorless smile. "Vincent Asher, your uncle's mistake." The name from the ledger. Before Ethan could react, Asher lunged. The knife flashed. Ethan barely dodged, feeling the blade graze his jacket sleeve. He stumbled back, the ledger falling into the leaves. Asher didn't go for the book. His eyes were locked on Ethan's pocket, where the pendant lay. "You have no idea what you're holding," Asher hissed. "Give it to me, and I might let you live." Ethan's hand closed around the pendant. "Why?" "What happens at midnight?" A gunshot rang out from the direction of the mansion. Asher flinched, his head snapping toward the sound. When he looked back, his eyes were wild. "They're here, the collectors." Another shot, closer this time. Asher made a decision. He scooped up the ledger and bolted into trees, his ragged coat flapping behind him like broken wings. Ethan didn't follow, because from the mansion's direction came a new sound, one that turned his blood to ice. A chorus of voices, chanting in unison, and the slow, steady toll of the bell, the collector's ritual. The chanting grew louder, a dissonant hymn that slithered through the trees. Each syllable prickled against Ethan's skin like static. He pressed his back against the rough bark of an oak, his breath shallow. Midnight was coming. He peered around the tree toward the mansion. Figures in long, hooded robes moved in a slow procession across the overgrown lawn, their faces hidden in shadow. They carried torches, the flames casting writhing light on the crumbling facade of Blackwood Estate. At the center of the group, two men dragged a struggling form between them. Daniel. Ethan's stomach lurched. His cousin's expensive suit was torn, his lips split and bleeding. Megan trailed behind, her hands bound with what looked like silver wire. "We found them hiding in the tunnels," one of the robed figures intoned. His voice echoed strangely, as if multiple people spoke through him at once. A taller figure stepped forward, their robe edged with crimson. The leader. They lifted their hands, and the chanting ceased instantly. The bloodline must answer for Robert's betrayal, the leader declared. The Raven's debt will be paid tonight. Daniel thrashed. "I don't know what you're talking about. I just wanted the money." The leader backhanded him across the face. A ring glinted on their finger, a silver raven with outstretched wings, identical to the pendant burning a hole in Ethan's pocket. Megan sobbed. "Please, we didn't." Silence. The leader turned to the others. Prepare the circle. At the stroke of midnight, we reclaim what was stolen. Ethan's mind raced. Uncle Robert hadn't just hidden a fortune. He'd stolen it from these people. And now they'd come to collect with interest. A twig snapped to his left. Vincent Asher crouched in the brush, his knife glinting. He pressed a finger to his lips, then pointed to the mansion's west wing. A broken window on the second floor gaped like a missing tooth. An entry point. Ethan hesitated. Every instinct screamed to run, to leave Daniel and Megan to their fate. But the ledger's words echoed in his mind. If the Raven find its shadow, the debt will be called due. He had the pendant. They needed it for whatever ritual was coming. Asher motioned again, more urgently. Ethan made his choice. He crept through the undergrowth, keeping low. The collectors were too focused on their preparations to notice as he slipped past the tree line and scaled the mansion's ivy-choked wall. The old vines held his weight, though they bit into his palms like barbed wire. He hauled himself through the broken window just as the grandfather clock in the foyer began to chime. Bong. Midnight. Bong. The chanting outside rose to fever pitch. Bong. Ethan landed in what must have been a bedroom. Moonlight streamed to a cracked ceiling, illuminating strange symbols painted on the walls, the same ones on the floorboards and ledger. Asher dropped in behind him, breathing hard. They'll use your cousins to open the vault's inner chamber, he whispered. Robert's blood is the key. Ethan's blood ran cold. What's in the inner chamber? Asher's eyes gleamed. The real treasure, the one that doesn't appear in any ledger. Outside, Daniel screamed. Ethan moved to the door, but Asher grabbed his arm. You can't stop the ritual, but you can steal its prize. He pressed the second Raven pendant into Ethan's hand. When the time comes, join them. The shadow must meet the light. The two pendants vibrated in Ethan's grip, as if trying to leap toward each other. Below, the chanting reached a crescendo. Then silence. A single voice cried out, "The door is opening!" Asher vanished into the shadows. Ethan was alone as the mansion began to shake. The inner vault, the mansion trembled as if something deep within its bones had awakened. Plaster rained from the ceiling as Ethan staggered into the hallway, the twin Raven pendants burning in his clenched fist. The air smelled of ozone and old blood. From the foyer below came a sound like stone grinding against stone, the vault door opening wider than before. The collectors' voices rose in unison, their chanting now feverish, triumphant. Ethan crept down the servant staircase, each step careful and silent. The symbols on the walls pulsed faintly in the torchlight, glowing as if lit from within. The scene in the foyer froze in mid-step. The collectors had formed a perfect circle around the open vault entrance. Daniel knelt at its center, his face ashen. Megan lay crumpled nearby, her wrists bleeding where the silver wire had cut into her flesh. The leader stood before them, arms raised, a ceremonial dagger glinting in one hand. "The blood of the betrayer shall awaken the sleeper," the leader intoned. Daniel whimpered. "Please, I don't know anything about." The dagger flashed downward. Ethan moved without thinking. He hurled a chunk of broken plaster from the staircase. It struck the leader's hood, knocking it back to reveal a face that made Ethan's breath catch, a woman with Uncle Robert's piercing blue eyes, her skin unnaturally smooth, ageless. The chanting stuttered. "Who dares?" the woman shrieked. Ethan stepped into the light, the pendants raised. "You want these?" The collectors gasped as one. The pendants throbbed in Ethan's grip, their vibration so strong now it traveled up his arms. The woman's eyes locked onto them with naked hunger. The twin ravens. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You're Robert's true heir." Daniel's head snapped up. "What?" The woman ignored him, stepping forward. "Give them to me and your cousins live." Ethan's mind raced. Asher's words echoed. The shadow must meet the light. He glanced at the open vault. The stone stairs spiraled down into darkness deeper than before, a cold wind rushing up from below. Something waited down there. Something these people feared and desired in equal measure. Ethan made his choice. He sprinted for the vault. The collectors moved as one, their robes swirling. Hands grabbed at him, but Ethan twisted free. diving down the stairs just as a dagger meant for his back struck stone instead. The temperature dropped with every step. The walls here weren't stone. They were lined with bones, carefully arranged in patterns that matched the symbols upstairs. The air tasted metallic, old. At the bottom, a circular chamber stretched before him, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it, a book. Not just any book. Its cover was made of what looked like blackened flesh, stitched together with silver thread. A single raven was embossed on the front, its eyes two glittering rubies. The pendants in Ethan's hand jerked violently, nearly leaping for his grasp toward the book. Behind him, footsteps pounded down the stairs. The collectors were coming. Ethan reached for the book just as the leader's voice rang out. "Don't!" Her scream held real terror. Ethan's fingers brushed the cover. The world exploded. A shockwave of force threw him backward as the book's stitches burst apart, its pages fluttering like wounded birds. The rubies fell from the raven's eyes, hitting the floor with crystalline chimes. And from the book's hollowed-out center, a small, withered hand unfurled. Then another. Something climbed out. The collectors fell to their knees, wailing. The leader covered her face. No, we weren't ready. The thing from the book stood no taller than a child, its body emaciated, its skin the color of old parchment. When it opened its eyes, they were pure black, no whites, no pupils, just endless darkness. It turned its head toward Ethan and smiled. The debt paid. The creature's smile stretched too wide, splitting its papery skin at the corners. A sound like rustling leaves escaped its throat. Laughter. Ethan scrambled back, his shoulders hitting the bone-lined wall. The twin pendants in his hand burned hotter, their metal searing his palm, but he couldn't let go. The collectors were prostrate on the floor, their foreheads pressed to the stone. Only their leader remained standing, though her hands trembled around the dagger. "You were not summoned," she whispered to the creature, its head tilted, black eyes unblinking. When it spoke, its voice was the creak of a rope tightening. "You brought me the blood. You woke me." A wet thud sounded from the stairs. Daniel's body tumbled into the chamber, his throat slit ear to ear. Megan followed, her lifeless eyes wide with terror. Blood pooled beneath them, snaking toward the creature in thin, deliberate rivulets. The leader gasped. "No, this wasn't the pact. Robert's heir is here. The debt is his to pay." The creature's gaze slid to Ethan. "Ah!" It inhaled deeply as if smelling him. Robert's blood, but not his greed. Ethan's breath came in shallow bursts. The pendants were melting into his skin now, their metal merging with his flesh in swirls of silver and black. Pain lanced up his arm, but with it came something else. Knowledge. The ledger's final warning flashed in his mind. The collection must never be reunited. He understood now. The vault's gold, the cars, the art, it was all bait, a distraction from the real treasure. This creature, bound centuries ago by the first Carter to stumble upon its power. A thing that fed on greed, that grew fat on broken promises. Uncle Robert had tried to free it, and failed. The creature took a step forward, its skeletal fingers flexing. "You carry my ravens. You know what I offer." Images flooded Ethan's mind. Well beyond imagining power, revenge against those who'd wronged him. Daniel's smug face melting to nothing. The mansion restored, gleaming his to command. All it would cost was a single drop of blood. Ethan looked at his cousin's corpses, at the weeping collectors, at the leader's dagger, still slick with Daniel's life. He closed his fist around the merged pendants. No. The creature's smile vanished. Ethan slammed his fist into the pedestal. The bone chamber shuddered as the pendants shattered, their fragments embedding in the creature's chest. It shrieked, a sound that split the air like tearing fabric. "You fool," it wailed. "I could have made you a god." The walls began to collapse. The collectors screamed as the bones animated, turning on them with jagged teeth. The leader lunged at Ethan, dagger raised, but falling ribcage caught her mid-step, impaling her through the stomach. Ethan ran. The stairs crumbled beneath him as he raced upward. Behind him, the creature's wails turned to guttural choking, then silence. He burst into foyer as the mansion gave one final groan. The floor buckled. The chandelier crashed down in a shower of glass and sparks. Ethan dove for the front door as Blackwood Estate collapsed inward, burying the vault, the creature, and the collectors in a tomb of wood and stone. Dawn's first light crept over the horizon as Ethan staggered to his feet. His hand ached where the pendants had fused, their remnants now just silver scars tracing the shape of wings. In the distance, sirens wailed. Ethan turned and walked away, leaving the ruins and the Carter family's cursed legacy behind. Did Ethan make the right choice? What would you have done in his place? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the story of greed and redemption, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales of dark secrets and shocking twists.